The moment King Valerion's lips began forming the word forever, his silver eyes locked onto the girl refilling his wineglass, and the ancient binding vow shattered mid-syllable like glass against stone. The grand cathedral of eternal night fell into a silence so absolute that Bianca Zimmerman could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She stood frozen beside the refreshment table, crystal decanter still tilted over the goblet she'd been instructed to keep filled throughout the ceremony. She was supposed to be invisible, just another human servant hired for the Vampire King's wedding to Lady Seraphine of House Nightshade. Instead, every immortal eye in the cathedral had turned toward her, and worse, the king himself was staring at her with an expression of such raw, bewildered recognition that it made her knees weak. Bianca had taken this catering job 3 hours ago because she desperately needed money for her sister's medical bills. She'd been told to wear black, keep her head down, and never make eye contact with the vampires. She'd followed every instruction perfectly until 30 seconds ago, when she'd glanced up at precisely the wrong moment and found herself caught in the king's gaze like a moth in amber. Lady Seraphine stood at the altar in a gown of midnight silk and diamonds, her white hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of moonlight, her porcelain features frozen in an expression of such fury that Bianca felt it like a physical force across the vast cathedral. The bride's crimson eyes blazed as she turned from the king to Bianca, and in that moment Bianca understood that she was looking at her own death. Valerion. Seraphine's voice could have cut diamonds. What is the meaning of this? The king Valerion stood motionless in his ceremonial armor of black and silver, his white hair pulled back from his angular face, revealing the sharp, inhuman beauty that marked him as vampire royalty. He was tall enough that Bianca would barely reach his shoulder, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of predators built for speed and strength. He looked perhaps 30 in human years, though Bianca knew from the whispered gossip of the other servers that he was over 800 years old. "I don't know," he said, and his voice carried through the cathedral with the same absolute authority that had silenced it moments before. "I don't understand." "You don't understand?" Seraphine's composure cracked like ice over deep water. "We are in the middle of our binding vow, a ceremony that has been arranged for 2 centuries, an alliance that will unite our houses and end decades of bloodshed. And you stop mid-vow to stare at a human servant?" Valerion finally tore his gaze away from Bianca, and she felt the loss of it like someone had pulled a warm blanket away on a winter night. He looked at his bride with something that might have been regret or confusion. Bianca couldn't tell which. "Seraphine, I apologize. Something happened. When I looked at her—" "I don't care what happened when you looked at her," Seraphine interrupted, her voice rising to a pitch that made several of the younger vampires flinch. "We will complete the ceremony now." But Valerion was already shaking his head, already stepping back from the altar. "I can't." The cathedral erupted into chaos. Vampires in elaborate court dress surged to their feet, voices rising in shock and outrage. The high priest who had been conducting the ceremony stumbled backward, his ancient face gray with horror. And Seraphine, Lady Seraphine of House Nightshade, daughter of one of the 5 most powerful vampire families in the world, released a sound that was neither scream nor shriek, but something far more primal and terrifying. Bianca did the only sensible thing. She dropped the decanter, ignored the crash of crystal on marble, and ran. She made it approximately 15 feet before Valerion appeared in front of her, moving with the inhuman speed that marked him as not just vampire but vampire royalty. He didn't touch her, didn't reach for her, but his presence alone was enough to root her to the spot. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, taller than she'd realized, with eyes like mercury and a face that managed to be both beautiful and utterly alien in its perfection. "Don't run from me," he said quietly, and it wasn't a command so much as a plea. "Please, I don't understand what's happening," Bianca whispered. Her voice shook. Everything shook. She was a 23-year-old community college student who worked 3 jobs to pay for her sister's cancer treatments. She had no business being at the center of vampire politics. "I was just supposed to pour wine." "I know." Valerion's expression was equal parts wonder and confusion. "I know, and I'm sorry, but when I looked at you—" He stopped, frustrated, one hand coming up to grip the back of his neck. "I don't have words for what I felt. Like recognition, like I've been searching for you for 8 centuries without knowing it." Behind them, Seraphine's voice cut through the chaos with the precision of a blade. "Valerion, either you return to this altar right now and complete our vows, or I will consider the alliance between our houses dissolved, and the human dies for the insult she has caused me." Bianca's blood went cold. She tried to step back, to move away from Valerion, to do anything that might make her less visible, less present, less responsible for destroying what was clearly a monumentally important political arrangement. But Valerion moved with her, his body shifting to place himself between her and the rest of the cathedral. "No one touches her," Valerion said, and his voice had dropped into a register that vibrated through Bianca's bones. This was the voice of a king, of something ancient and powerful and absolutely unaccustomed to being challenged. Seraphine, I know what I'm destroying, I know what this will cost. But I cannot bind myself to you. When he stopped again, and when he glanced back at Bianca, his expression was raw with an emotion she couldn't name. I don't understand this any more than you do. But I cannot complete those vows. I'm sorry. Sorry? Seraphine had descended from the altar, gliding across the marble floor with the predatory grace of her kind. Her court dress trailed behind her like spilled ink, and her beauty was the kind that could start wars or end them. You think sorry is sufficient? My family will declare war on House Valerion for this humiliation. The treaties will collapse, the peace will end, and for what? For a human whose name you don't even know? Valerion turned fully towards Seraphine, keeping himself positioned between her and Bianca. Then I will face the consequences. But she leaves here safely. Why? Seraphine demanded, and for the first time genuine confusion crossed her perfect features. Valerion, you've never been reckless, you've never been impulsive, you've ruled for 4 centuries with logic and strategy. What could possibly compel you to destroy everything for a creature whose lifespan is shorter than some of our dinners? Bianca might have been insulted if she weren't too terrified to process anything beyond the immediate threat to her life. She could feel the weight of hundreds of vampire gazes on her back, could sense the hostility radiating from nobles who had probably spent years preparing for this alliance. She was a loose thread in their perfect tapestry, and they wanted her removed. I don't know, Valerion admitted, and the honesty in his voice was somehow worse than any lie would have been. I don't know, Seraphine. If I knew, if I could explain it, perhaps I could fight it. But when I look at her, he stopped, and Bianca saw his jaw tighten. It feels like destiny, like fate. Like every choice I've made for 800 years has been leading to this moment. Vampires don't believe in destiny, Seraphine said coldly. I didn't, Valerion agreed. Until 30 seconds ago. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if the massive doors at the cathedral's entrance hadn't burst open with enough force to crack the ancient wood. A vampire in the armor of the royal guard strode in, his white hair disheveled, his pale face urgent. My lord, the southern border is under attack. House Nightshade's forces have crossed into our territory. They're demanding the completion of the marriage alliance, or they'll consider it an act of war. Seraphine smiled, and it was a terrible thing to witness. It appears my father doesn't wait for official declarations. Complete the vow, Valerion, or watch your kingdom burn. Valerion's expression hardened into something that reminded Bianca that he wasn't just a king but a warrior who had held his throne for 400 years through strength and cunning. Return to your father, Seraphine, and tell him that if he wants war, House Valerion will give him war. But this human is under my protection, and anyone who touches her dies. The weight of that statement settled over the cathedral like a physical force. Bianca felt it pressing down on her shoulders, the full understanding of what was happening. A vampire king was starting a war over her. The thought was so absurd, so impossibly overwhelming, that she couldn't quite process it. Seraphine's crimson eyes flickered to Bianca one last time, and the hatred in them was pure and absolute. You have no idea what you've done, human, no idea what you've cost. I hope whatever hold you have over him is worth the blood that will be spilled. Then she turned in a swirl of silk and fury and strode from the cathedral, her attendants scrambling to follow. The moment she left, the tension in the room shifted but didn't dissipate. The remaining nobles began talking urgently among themselves, some looking angry, others calculating, a few frightened. Valerion turned back to Bianca, and his expression softened in a way that seemed almost painful. I need to get you somewhere safe. Will you come with me? Do I have a choice? Bianca asked, and she was proud that her voice only shook a little. Yes. Valerion's answer was immediate and firm. You always have a choice with me. I can arrange protection for you elsewhere if you prefer. I can assign guards to watch over you at a distance. But I would feel better if you were somewhere I could personally ensure your safety. Bianca thought about her tiny apartment, about her sister in the hospital, about the normal life she'd been living just hours ago. All of that felt impossibly distant now, like a dream she was waking from. Your ex-fiancé just threatened to kill me, and her father is apparently invading your kingdom. I don't think I'm safe anywhere. You're safe with me, Valerion said, and he said it with such absolute conviction that Bianca found herself believing him. I swear it on my name and crown. No one will harm you while I draw breath. It was possibly the most dramatic declaration Bianca had ever heard, and coming from anyone else, she would have laughed. But there was nothing funny about the way Valerion looked at her, nothing amusing about the situation they were in, so instead of laughing she nodded. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll come with you. But I need to call my sister. She'll be worried if I don't check in. Something flickered across Valerion's face, surprise perhaps, or respect. Of course, I'll take you somewhere private where you can make your call, but we need to leave now. This cathedral isn't safe anymore. He held out his hand, and Bianca stared at it for a long moment. Those fingers were long and elegant, the nails slightly pointed, the skin so pale it was almost luminescent. They were the hands of something not human, something dangerous and ancient and powerful. Taking that hand would mean stepping fully into a world she didn't understand, accepting protection from a being who had just started a war because of her. She took his hand. His skin was cool against hers, but not cold, and his grip was gentle despite the strength she could feel coiled beneath it. The moment their palms touched, something electric passed between them, a recognition, a connection, something that made Valerion's eyes widen and Bianca's breath catch. "Do you feel that?" Valerion whispered. "I don't know what I feel," Bianca admitted. "This whole night is insane." A smile touched Valerion's lips, small and slightly sad. "Yes, yes it is." Then he pulled her closer, his other arm coming around her waist. "Hold on to me. Vampire speed can be disorienting for humans." Before Bianca could ask what he meant, the world blurred into streaks of color and shadow, and she felt the stomach-dropping sensation of impossibly rapid movement. She buried her face against Valerion's chest on instinct, squeezing her eyes shut against the dizzying rush. He smelled like winter and old books and something indefinably foreign, and his body was solid and steady against hers as the world rearranged itself around them. When everything stopped moving, Bianca opened her eyes to find herself standing in a room that looked like it had been transplanted from a Gothic palace. Stone walls were draped with tapestries depicting battles and coronations. Enormous windows looked out over a city glittering with lights, and furniture that was probably worth more than Bianca's life filled the space with austere elegance. "Welcome to my private chambers," Valerion said, releasing her carefully and stepping back to give her space. "You're safe here. These rooms are protected by wards that prevent anyone from entering without my permission." Bianca turned in a slow circle, trying to process the opulence surrounding her. "This is your bedroom?" "My suite, yes. Bedroom, study, sitting room." Valerion moved toward a door at the far end of the room. "The bathroom is through here if you need it, and you can use the phone on my desk to call your sister." The casual mention of her sister brought Bianca crashing back to reality. She hurried to the desk, a massive thing of dark wood and silver inlay, and picked up the phone. Her hands shook as she dialed the hospital number she knew by heart. "Sunset Memorial, how may I direct your call?" "Room 447, please, Julia Zimmerman." The phone rang twice before her sister picked up. "Hello? Jules, it's me." Bianca sank into the desk chair, suddenly exhausted. "I'm okay. I just wanted to check in. B, you sound weird. Is everything all right with the catering job?" Julia's voice was weak but alert, sharpened by the concern only siblings could produce. "The job was complicated. I'm fine, though. How are you feeling?" "Still alive. So that's something." Julia managed a weak laugh. "The doctor said my numbers are looking better today. Maybe the new treatment is working." Relief flooded through Bianca so intensely that she felt tears prick her eyes. "That's great, Jules. That's really great. Are you sure you're okay?"
You sound stressed.
Bianca glanced at Valerion, who had moved to stand by the window, giving her the illusion of privacy even though he could undoubtedly hear every word with his vampire hearing. How could she possibly explain what had happened? "Just a long night. I'll tell you about it later. Get some rest, okay? I love you. Love you too, B." Bianca set the phone down and dropped her head into her hands. The full weight of the situation was finally hitting her. She'd been present when a vampire king abandoned his bride. She'd somehow impossibly, inexplicably caught the attention of one of the most powerful immortals in the world. And now there was going to be a war, and it was at least partially her fault. "Hey," Valerion's voice was soft, and when Bianca looked up, he was kneeling beside her chair, bringing his face level with hers. "Breathe, you're starting to hyperventilate." "I'm starting to have a completely rational panic response to an insane situation," Bianca corrected, but she tried to slow her breathing anyway. "Your ex-fiancé wants me dead. Her father is invading your kingdom, and I don't even understand why any of this is happening." Valerion's expression turned troubled. "Neither do I, not fully, but I'm going to figure it out." He hesitated, then continued. "May I ask about your sister? I heard you mention treatments." "She has leukemia," Bianca said flatly. "She's 20, and she has cancer, and the treatments are expensive, and that's why I took this stupid catering job in the first place, because I needed the money." She laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. "I was supposed to get paid $300 tonight. $300. And instead, I started a war." "You didn't start a war," Valerion said firmly. "I did. When I chose to acknowledge whatever this connection is between us instead of completing my political obligation. That was my choice, Bianca Zimmerman. Don't carry that weight." Hearing him use her full name made everything feel more real somehow. "You learned my name from your phone call, yes?" Valerion's slight smile returned. "Though I would have asked eventually." "I don't understand any of this," Bianca admitted. "Vampires are supposed to be logical, calculating. You don't believe in love at first sight or soulmates or any of that romantic nonsense. Everyone knows that. So why?" Why would you destroy your wedding, start a war, risk everything for someone you don't even know? Valerion was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes studying her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. Vampires are logical, he agreed. We're calculating. We don't believe in destiny because we've lived long enough to see how random and chaotic the universe actually is. But Bianca, when I looked at you tonight, when our eyes met across that cathedral, he stopped, frustrated. Have you ever experienced something that completely contradicts everything you thought you knew about yourself? I'm experiencing that right now, Bianca pointed out. That earned her a genuine smile, brief but warm. Fair, then perhaps we're learning together. He stood, offering his hand again. You must be exhausted. I'll have one of my trusted staff bring you food and appropriate clothing. You can rest here tonight, and in the morning, we'll discuss what happens next. What about you? Bianca asked, taking his hand and letting him help her to her feet. Don't you need to deal with the invasion and the political crisis and everything else? My generals are managing the borders situation, Valerion said. And the political crisis will still be there in the morning. He guided her toward an adjoining room that proved to be a bedroom even more luxurious than the sitting room. The bed alone was the size of Bianca's entire apartment, covered in silk sheets the color of deep wine. Rest, please, you're safe here. Bianca wanted to argue, wanted to demand more answers, wanted to do something other than meekly accept being tucked away in a vampire king's bedroom. But exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical force, and the bed looked impossibly inviting. Okay, she said. But tomorrow I need real answers. About what's happening, about what you felt, about all of it. Tomorrow you'll have every answer I can give, Valerion promised. He moved toward the door, then paused. Bianca, thank you. For what? For not running when you had the chance. For trusting me even though you have no reason to. His expression was impossibly gentle. For existing. He left before Bianca could formulate a response to that, closing the door quietly behind him. She stood in the center of the enormous bedroom, still wearing her server's uniform, and tried to process the fact that she was apparently spending the night in the Vampire King's chambers. Her life had officially become a fairy tale. She just wasn't sure if it was the kind with a happy ending or the kind where the maiden got eaten by monsters. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Bianca opened the door to find a female vampire with white hair braided in an intricate crown, wearing elegant servant's livery. She carried a tray of food and a bundle of fabric. Miss Zimmerman, I'm Alara. His Majesty asked me to bring you refreshments and something more comfortable to wear. Alara's eyes were curious but not hostile as she entered and set the tray on a side table. I've also prepared a bath for you, if you'd like. That's very kind, thank you. Bianca eyed the food, fruits and cheese and bread that smelled freshly baked. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since her shift at the coffee shop that morning. Can I ask you something? Of course, miss. Is the king okay? I mean, he just abandoned his wedding and started a war. That can't be easy even for someone immortal. Alara's expression turned thoughtful. His Majesty is troubled. I've served him for 70 years, and I've never seen him act with such disregard for political consequences. But I've also never seen him look at someone the way he looked at you in that cathedral. She smiled slightly. Whatever is happening between you two, it's unprecedented. And in 800 years of vampire history, unprecedented usually means significant. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it made Bianca's anxiety spike again. What if I'm not significant enough? What if whatever he felt was just a moment of madness, and when it passes, he'll regret everything he gave up? Then that would be his regret to bear, not yours, Alara said gently. But for what it's worth, I don't think His Majesty is experiencing madness. I think he's experiencing something he's never felt before, and it's terrifying him. The question is whether you're brave enough to be terrified alongside him. With that cryptic statement, Alara curtsied and left. Bianca stared at the closed door for a long moment, then turned to the food. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Her mind churning with questions and fears, and the memory of Valerion's eyes locked on hers. The bath helped. The warm water soothed muscles she hadn't realized were tense, and the bathroom itself was such an exercise in luxury that Bianca couldn't help but be distracted by it. Marble and gold and a tub large enough to swim in, this was how vampire royalty lived, apparently. The clothes Alara had brought were simpler than Bianca expected: soft sleep pants and a loose shirt. Both in shades of gray that somehow managed to look elegant despite their simplicity. They fit perfectly, which was slightly unsettling. Had Valerion guessed her size? Or did vampires have some supernatural ability to assess measurements at a glance? She was contemplating this when she heard shouting from the other room, not Valerion, but multiple voices raised in what sounded like argument. Bianca crept to the door and pressed her ear against it, trying to make out words. Completely reckless. Alliance was everything, obsessed with a human. Then Valerion's voice cut through the chaos, cold and absolute. I don't require your approval, I require your loyalty. If you cannot give me that, leave now. Silence followed, thick and tense, then footsteps receding and a door slamming. Bianca waited, holding her breath, wondering if she should go out there or stay hidden like a coward. The choice was taken from her when Valerion opened the bedroom door. He looked exhausted in a way that seemed impossible for an immortal being, shoulders tight with tension, jaw clenched, silver eyes stormy. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I tried to keep them quiet, but it's fine." Bianca interrupted. "They're angry with you. Because of me. They're angry because I disrupted decades of careful planning," Valerion corrected. "Because I prioritized something they don't understand over political stability." He leaned against the doorframe and for a moment, he looked every one of his 800 years. "My council thinks I've gone mad. Perhaps they're right." "Have you?" Bianca asked. "Gone mad? I don't know." Valerion's honesty was almost painful. "How do you tell the difference between madness and revelation? Between delusion and truth?" Bianca considered this. "I guess you wait and see if you still feel the same way when the initial intensity fades. If it's madness, it'll pass. If it's real," she stopped, uncertain how to finish that sentence. "If it's real, it will last," Valerion completed softly. "And potentially cost me everything I've built over centuries." "Then maybe you should take me back to my apartment and forget this ever happened," Bianca suggested, even though the thought made something twist painfully in her chest. "Before you lose anything else." Valerion's response was immediate and vehement. "No, why not?" He pushed off the doorframe and crossed the room until he stood directly in front of her, close enough that Bianca had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Because I've spent 800 years being careful, being strategic, prioritizing duty over desire. And for what? A crown I never wanted? An endless parade of political maneuvering and calculated alliances? I've been alive for nearly a millennium, Bianca, and until tonight, I'm not sure I was ever truly living." "That's very romantic," Bianca said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But it's also potentially very destructive. People are going to die in this war. Your people, Seraphine's people. Can you live with that? Can I live with letting you go? Knowing I'll spend the rest of my immortal existence wondering what we could have been," Valerion countered. His hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching. "I know it's selfish. I know it's reckless. But Bianca, when I looked at you tonight, I felt something I've never felt in 8 centuries. Hope." Bianca's breath caught. "Hope for what? For something more, for connection." For he stopped, frustrated again. "I don't have the words. It's like I've been existing in shades of gray, and you're the first color I've seen." It was such a achingly poetic thing to say that Bianca felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not special," she whispered. "I'm just a college student with debt and a sick sister and 3 part-time jobs. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody to me," Valerion said fiercely. "And I intend to prove that to you, if you'll let me. How? By giving you every choice, every option, every moment of autonomy I can offer." His hand finally made contact, fingertips ghosting across her cheek so gently that Bianca barely felt it. "I won't force you to stay. I won't manipulate you or coerce you or use my power to control you. But I will protect you, I will keep you safe, and I will hope desperately, futilely, that you'll choose to stay long enough to let this, whatever it is between us, develop into something real." Bianca should have been terrified. She should have been running for the exits, escaping before she got in any deeper. But instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, found her hand coming up to cover his where it rested against her cheek. "I should go home," she said, but she didn't move. "You should," Valerion agreed. But his thumb was tracing slow circles on her skin, sending shivers down her spine. "This is crazy, completely insane. You could die because of me. I'm already dead, technically." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Comes with the vampire territory." That startled a laugh out of Bianca, short and slightly breathless. "You know what I mean?" "I do." Valerion's expression turned serious again. "And I know what I'm risking. But Bianca, I've survived 800 years. I've fought in wars, navigated political coups, outlived everyone I've ever cared about. And none of it has made me feel as alive as the 5 minutes I spent looking at you across that cathedral." "That could fade," Bianca warned. "Intensity like that doesn't last. Then we'll discover that together." Valerion's other hand came up, framing her face between his palms. "Stay. Not forever, I would never ask that of you. But stay long enough to see if this is real, please." Bianca knew she should say no, knew she should demand to go home, to return to her normal life, to extract herself from this impossible situation before it consumed her entirely. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Okay, I'll stay." The relief that washed over Valerion's face was so profound that it made him look young, almost vulnerable. "Thank you," he breathed, and then slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. It was the chaste kiss, almost paternal in its gentleness, and yet it sent electricity racing through Bianca's entire body. His lips were cool and soft, and he lingered there for a moment that felt suspended outside of time. When he pulled back, his eyes had darkened to the color of storm clouds. "You should rest. We both should. Tomorrow will be complicated." "More complicated than today?" Bianca asked wryly. That earned her a genuine smile, warm and real. "Fair point. But still, sleep. I'll be in the next room if you need anything." He started to turn away, but Bianca caught his hand. "Valerion, what happened tonight in the cathedral when you looked at me? Can you try to explain it better? Because I felt something too, and it scared me." Valerion's expression turned thoughtful. It was like, have you ever had the experience of hearing a song and knowing every word before you've heard it, or meeting someone and feeling like you've known them your entire life? "No," Bianca admitted. "Neither had I until tonight." He squeezed her hand gently. "It was recognition, not of your face or your features, but of something deeper. Your essence maybe, your soul. Like I'd been searching for you without knowing what I was searching for, and suddenly there you were." "That's impossible," Bianca said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Yes," Valerion agreed. "It should be. But Bianca, I've lived for 8 centuries. I've seen things that shouldn't be possible become reality. I've watched the world change in ways that defy logic. So maybe, just maybe, impossible things are more common than we think." He left her with that thought, closing the door softly behind him. Bianca stood in the center of the enormous bedroom, still feeling the phantom pressure of his lips on her forehead, and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. She failed spectacularly. Eventually, exhaustion won out over confusion, and she crawled into the massive bed. The sheets were as soft as they looked, and the mattress seemed to mold perfectly to her body. She should have been too wired to sleep, too anxious about the war and the threats and the impossible situation she'd stumbled into. Instead, she fell asleep almost immediately, and she dreamed of silver eyes and winter smiles and the feeling of being found when she hadn't known she was lost. She woke to sunlight streaming through gaps in heavy curtains and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, Bianca couldn't remember where she was. Then memory crashed back: the cathedral, the king, the abandoned wedding, and she sat up so fast that she made herself dizzy. The bedroom door was cracked open, and through it she could hear voices. Valerion's, deep and measured, and someone else's, younger and more animated, simply saying that perhaps you should have considered the consequences before you. "I'm aware of the consequences, Cassian. Are you? Because from where I'm standing it looks like you've started a war over a pretty face." There was a long, dangerous pause. Then Valerion's voice, colder than Bianca had heard it before. "Careful. You're speaking of someone under my protection. I'm speaking of a human who's caused you to throw away 2 centuries of careful alliance building. She must be extraordinary. She is." The conviction in those 2 words made Bianca's chest tight. She slipped out of bed and crept closer to the door, shamelessly eavesdropping. "I've known you for 300 years, Val. I've never seen you act impulsively, ever. So forgive me for being concerned when you abandon your wedding mid-vow and start what will likely be a decade-long conflict over a woman whose name you don't even—" "Bianca Zimmerman," Valerion interrupted. "Her name is Bianca Zimmerman. She's 23 years old. She's studying to be a teacher while working 3 jobs to pay for her sister's cancer treatments. She's brave and kind, and when she laughs it's like hearing music for the first time. Don't reduce her to a pretty face, Cassian. She deserves better than that." Silence. Then the other voice, Cassian said more gently, "You really feel something for her. This isn't just politics or posturing." "I feel something I don't understand," Valerion admitted. "Something that defies 800 years of logic and control. And yes, it's terrifying. But Cassian, I would rather face that terror than spend another century in the cold numbness I've been calling existence." Bianca decided that was her cue to stop eavesdropping. She knocked lightly on the door, then pushed it open. "Morning. Sorry. I didn't mean to intrude on your conversation." The sitting room was occupied by Valerion and another vampire, this one younger looking, with white hair cut short and bright amber eyes. He was handsome in the sharp, angular way of all vampires, dressed in dark clothing that had a military cut to it. "Bianca." Valerion stood immediately, his expression transforming from serious to something softer. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected, honestly." Bianca moved further into the room, very aware of Cassian's curious gaze on her. "I'm guessing you're here to yell at your king for being an idiot?" Cassian blinked, then laughed a surprised, genuine sound. "I like her, and yes, actually. Though he seems committed to his idiocy, so my yelling is proving ineffective." "It's not idiocy to follow your instincts," Valerion said, but he was looking at Bianca, not Cassian. "It is when your instincts are leading you toward war," Cassian countered. Then he sighed. "But you're clearly not going to be reasoned with, so I'll focus my efforts on damage control. The border situation is contained for now. Seraphine's father pulled his forces back after you sent him that rather threatening letter." "What letter?" Bianca asked. "The one where I explained that any aggression toward my kingdom would be met with absolute retaliation," Valerion said calmly. and that any attempt to harm you specifically would result in me personally tearing his house apart stone by stone. That's romantic and also terrifying, Bianca said faintly. Welcome to vampire politics, Cassian said cheerfully, where every love declaration is also a thinly veiled threat. He stood, nodding to Valerion. I'll give you two privacy. But Val, we need to address the council soon. They're getting restless, I know, this afternoon. After Cassian left, Bianca turned to Valerion. You sent a threatening letter to Seraphine's father because of me. I sent a factual letter outlining the consequences of aggressive action, Valerion corrected. The threat was merely implied. Valerion, I know what you're going to say, he interrupted gently. That this is too much. That you're not worth starting a war over. That I'm being reckless. He crossed the room until he stood in front of her, close but not touching. But Bianca, you need to understand something about vampires. We don't form connections easily. When we do, we protect them with everything we have. It's not romantic poetry, it's biology, psychology, the fundamental nature of what we are. So you're saying this obsessive protectiveness is just vampire nature? I'm saying that vampires bond rarely but intensely, and when we find someone worth protecting, we become territorial, possessive, absolutely unyielding in our defense. His silver eyes searched her face. I'm trying to be honest with you about what you're signing up for if you stay. I will always put your safety first. I will always react with extreme prejudice to any threat against you, and I will never ever apologize for it. Bianca should have been put off by the intensity of that declaration. Instead, she found it oddly reassuring. What about my autonomy, my choices? Sacred, Valerion said immediately. I'll protect you, but I won't control you. There's a difference, and if I choose to leave? Pain flickered across his face, quick and sharp. Then I'll ensure you have the resources and protection to do so safely. But I'll ask you to stay. Every day I'll ask you to stay. The honesty in his voice made Bianca's throat tight. This is insane, she whispered. Yes, Valerion agreed. But is it the kind of insane you're willing to explore? Bianca thought about her life before last night, the endless cycle of work and worry, the stress of medical bills and late shifts, the gray predictability of it all. Then she thought about the way Valerion had looked at her in the cathedral, the way he'd stepped between her and danger without hesitation, the way he spoke about her like she was something precious. I have conditions, she said finally. Hope bloomed in Valerion's expression, bright and almost painful in its intensity. Name them first. I need to be able to see my sister regularly. She's sick and she needs me. Done. I'll arrange transportation and security whenever you want to visit. Second, this thing between us, whatever it is, I need it to develop naturally. No vampire magic, no supernatural coercion, no shortcuts. If we're going to figure out if this is real, it has to happen honestly. Agreed completely. Third, I need you to explain your world to me. The politics, the power structures, the rules. If I'm going to be part of this, I need to understand what I'm dealing with. I'll teach you everything, Valerion promised. Starting today if you want. And finally, Bianca took a breath. If this doesn't work out, if we discover that what you felt was just a moment of madness, you have to let me go. No guilt, no obligation, no keeping me around out of some misplaced sense of duty. That one made Valerion hesitate. If you want to leave, I'll never stop you. But Bianca, I don't think what I feel is going to fade. I think it's only going to grow stronger. You can't know that. No, he agreed, but I can hope. Is hope enough to start with? Bianca looked at him, really looked at him. At the ancient being in a young man's form, at the king who had thrown away political stability for a woman he'd seen across a crowded room, at the vampire who was looking at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for 800 years. Yeah, she said softly. Hope is enough. The smile that spread across Valerion's face was radiant, transforming his features from merely beautiful to absolutely stunning. Thank you, he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. Thank you for giving this a chance. Don't thank me yet, Bianca warned. I'm probably going to be terrible at vampire politics. I'll teach you. It's mostly posturing and veiled insults anyway. That actually sounds exactly like my family reunions, so maybe I'll be better at it than I think. Valerion laughed, a real full laugh that made his eyes crinkle at the corners, and Bianca felt something shift in her chest. Something that felt dangerously like affection. The rest of the morning was spent in what Valerion called crash course vampire politics, which turned out to be exactly as complicated as Bianca had feared. There were 5 major vampire houses, each controlling different territories and resources. House Valdar and Valerion's house controlled the northern territories and was known for military strength and strategic cunning. House Nightshade Seraphine's family controlled the eastern territories and had wealth derived from centuries of trade monopolies. The marriage alliance between Valerion and Seraphine was meant to unite the 2 most powerful houses, creating a political bloc that would have dominated vampire society for the next few centuries. By abandoning the wedding, Valerion had essentially thrown vampire politics into chaos. So everyone hates me now, Bianca summarized when Valerion finished explaining. Not everyone. Many vampires find the entire situation fascinating. Vampires love drama even when we pretend to be above it. Valerion was sitting across from her in his study, maps and documents spread across the massive desk between them. But yes, the major houses are upset. They'd invested heavily in the alliance. What about Seraphine? How is she handling it? Valerion's expression turned troubled. Publicly, she's maintaining dignity. Privately, according to my sources, she's furious and hurt. Which I understand. I humiliated her in front of Vampire Society. That's not easily forgiven. Bianca felt a pang of guilt. I'm sorry, I know you didn't want to hurt her. No, I didn't. Seraphine is intelligent and capable, and she deserved better than what I did to her. But Bianca, he leaned forward, his silver eyes intense, I couldn't complete those vows. Even before I saw you, there was doubt. The marriage was duty, not desire. Logical, but empty. You didn't cause that emptiness. You just made me aware of it. That's a very generous interpretation. It's the truth. Valerion stood and moved around the desk, settling against the edge so he was closer to her. Seraphine and I would have had a functional political partnership, but we would never have had what I felt the moment I looked at you. And after 800 years of functional partnerships, I find I want something more. Before Bianca could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. Cassian entered without waiting for permission, his expression urgent. We have a problem, Lady Seraphine is here. In the castle. She's demanding an audience. Valerion's body went rigid. How did she get past the wards? She's still technically recognized as an ally by the castle defenses since you never formally dissolved the engagement. Cassian glanced at Bianca. She's asking to speak with you. Both of you. Bianca's stomach dropped. She wants to talk to me? She says she deserves to understand why you're worth destroying her life over, Cassian said bluntly. Her words, not mine. Absolutely not, Valerion said immediately. I'm not putting Bianca in a room with someone who wants her dead. I'll do it, Bianca said, surprising herself. Both vampires turned to stare at her. Bianca Valerion started. She deserves answers, Bianca interrupted. And honestly, so do I. Maybe if we talk, we can figure out if there's a way to resolve this that doesn't end in decades of war. There's no reasoning with Seraphine when she's been humiliated, Valerion said. She'll see this as weakness, then she'll see weakness, but I have to try. Bianca stood, squaring her shoulders. Besides, you said vampires respect strength, right? Maybe facing her directly will earn me some credibility. Cassian made a considering sound. She's not wrong, Val. Running from Seraphine will only make this worse. At least if they talk, there's a chance of de-escalation. Valerion looked torn, his protective instincts clearly warring with logic. Finally, he nodded. Fine. But I'm staying in the room. And if she makes a single threatening move, I'm ending the conversation. Fair enough. Bianca tried to project confidence she didn't feel. Where is she? The throne room, Cassian said. Because she has a flair for drama. The throne room turned out to be as impressive as Bianca had feared, a vast chamber with vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows depicting vampire history, and an actual throne on a raised dais at the far end. Seraphine stood in the center of the room, looking like she'd stepped out of a painting. Her white hair was unbound today, cascading down her back like silk, and she wore a gown of deep crimson that made her pale skin luminous. She was, objectively, the most beautiful being Bianca had ever seen, which somehow made everything worse. Lady Seraphine, Valerion said formally as they entered. You requested an audience. Seraphine's crimson eyes fixed on Bianca with an intensity that made her want to step behind Valerion, but she held her ground, lifting her chin and meeting the vampire's gaze directly. So you're the human, Seraphine said, her voice like frost over steel. The ordinary little creature who destroyed 2 centuries of planning. I didn't destroy anything, Bianca said, keeping her voice steady. I was pouring wine. That's all. And yet my fiancé abandoned our wedding vows mid-ceremony because of you. Seraphine glided forward, circling Bianca like a predator examining prey. I've been trying to understand it. What makes you so special? You're not particularly beautiful by vampire standards. You're not powerful or influential. You're human, which means you'll be dead in the span of time it takes me to have lunch. So what is it, Bianca Zimmerman? What hold do you have over the king? I don't know, Bianca admitted. I don't understand this any more than you do. You must have done something, Seraphine pressed, smiled at him, said something. Used some trick, or she did nothing, Valerion interrupted, his voice hard. Bianca was serving wine. She glanced up at the wrong moment. That's all? That's all? Seraphine whirled on him, and for the first time, Bianca saw real emotion crack through her icy facade. That's all it took? One glance from a human server and you threw away everything we'd built? We hadn't built anything, Valerion said quietly. Be honest, Seraphine. Our marriage would have been a contract, not a partnership. Functional, but empty. And that's not enough for you anymore? Seraphine's voice broke slightly. After 800 years, you suddenly need fairy tale romance. I need to feel something, Valerion said. Anything other than the endless gray responsibility of ruling, is that so wrong? It is when it costs me my dignity and my alliance. Seraphine's composure shattered completely, her voice rising to something raw and hurt. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? I've been preparing for this wedding for 2 centuries. I've shaped my entire existence around becoming your queen, and you destroyed that because of a feeling? The pain in her voice made Bianca's chest ache with sympathy. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I know that's inadequate, but I am. You didn't deserve to be humiliated like that. Seraphine turned to her, eyes blazing. I don't want your pity, human. I want you gone. I want you erased from existence so thoroughly that Valerion forgets you ever lived. Seraphine, Valerion said warningly, stepping forward. No. Seraphine held up a hand. Let me finish. I came here for answers, and I deserve the truth. She looked at Valerion, and her expression was a mixture of fury and heartbreak. Do you love her? After one night, after one glance, do you actually love this human? Valerion was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I don't know if what I feel is love. It's too new, too undefined. But Seraphine, it's something real and vital and completely unprecedented. And yes, I chose that over our arrangement. I'm sorry that hurt you. Sorry doesn't rebuild my reputation, Seraphine said bitterly. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation. Sorry doesn't give me back the 2 centuries I spent preparing to be your queen. No, Valerion agreed. It doesn't. But I can offer you something else. An honorable dissolution of our engagement. Public acknowledgement that the failure of our alliance was my decision, not yours. And a treaty that maintains trade agreements and mutual defense pacts between our houses. You think treaties will satisfy my family after this insult? I think it's better than war, Valerion said bluntly. Seraphine, I know you're angry. I know you feel betrayed. But ask yourself if you really want to spend the next century fighting a war you can't win. Because I will protect Bianca. With everything I have, I will protect her. Even if that means destroying your family's power base entirely. The threat hung in the air, stark and undeniable. Seraphine stared at Valerion for a long moment, something like recognition dawning in her eyes. You really mean that? You would actually go to war over her? Yes. Seraphine laughed, bitter and sharp. Then you're a fool, Valerion. A romantic fool who's letting emotion override 800 years of strategic thinking. She turned to Bianca. I hope you appreciate what he's sacrificing for you. I hope you're worth the blood that will be spilled. I hope so too, Bianca said honestly. But I can't control what Valerion feels or chooses. I can only control my own actions. Then choose to leave, Seraphine said. Walk away from this. Return to your human life and let Valerion remember his duty to his people. For a heartbeat, Bianca actually considered it. It would be so easy to step back, to remove herself from this impossible situation, to let vampire politics return to their previous trajectory. She was the disruptive element here. Remove her, and everything could potentially stabilize. But then she thought about the way Valerion had looked at her in the cathedral, the way he'd protected her without hesitation, the way he spoke about feeling alive for the first time in centuries. Could she really take that away from him, even if it meant preventing conflict? I can't, she said finally. I'm sorry, but I can't. Not yet. I need to see where this leads. Seraphine's expression hardened. Then you're as foolish as he is. And when this ends in disaster because it will, don't say you weren't warned. She swept from the throne room in a swirl of crimson silk, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy with consequence. That went well, Bianca said after a moment, and was relieved when Valerion laughed. Better than I expected, actually. She didn't try to kill you, which I was genuinely concerned about. Low bar for success. Welcome to vampire politics. Valerion moved closer, his expression turning serious. Bianca, she's right about one thing. This will likely end in conflict. Seraphine's family won't accept this humiliation quietly. Are you sure you want to stay in the middle of it? No, Bianca admitted. I'm not sure about anything, but I gave you my answer and I meant it. I'm staying, at least for now. The relief on Valerion's face was profound. Thank you, he said quietly. Then more hesitantly, may I hold you? I find I need the reassurance of your physical presence after that confrontation. The formal request was so at odds with the intensity of the situation that Bianca almost laughed, but she nodded, stepping into Valerion's arms when he opened them. He folded her against his chest carefully like she was something precious and fragile, and Bianca felt the tension drain from his body. He was cold in the way all vampires were cold, but it wasn't unpleasant, more like being held by living marble, solid and unchanging and oddly comforting. Bianca let herself relax into his embrace, listening to the absence of a heartbeat in his chest. You don't have a heartbeat, she observed. No, vampire circulatory systems work differently. Blood moves through us but not via a beating heart. That should be creepy, but somehow it's not. She felt rather than heard his laugh, a rumble through his chest. I'm glad my undead nature doesn't repel you. Ask me again when I'm more settled. I might change my mind. They stood like that for several minutes, wrapped together in the vast throne room, and Bianca tried not to think about how right it felt. How natural, despite the complete insanity of the situation. Finally, Valerion pulled back slightly, looking down at her with an expression that was equal parts wonder and confusion. I still don't understand this, he admitted. This connection between us. It defies everything I know about vampire bonding. Maybe that's the point, Bianca suggested. Maybe it's not supposed to make sense. Vampires prefer things that make sense. I'm starting to realize that. Bianca studied his face, noting the tension lines around his eyes, the tightness in his jaw. You're worried about more than just Seraphine and the politics. I'm worried about you, Valerion admitted. About what this life will cost you. You had a normal existence before last night. Friends, family, a future planned out. I've pulled you into a world of danger and politics and immortal grudges. That's not fair to you. Life's not fair, Bianca said pragmatically. My sister got cancer at 19. I had to drop out of university to help pay for her treatments. Fair doesn't really factor into it. You just deal with what happens and try to make the best choices you can. That's very pragmatic. I'm a very pragmatic person. Comes from being broke and terrified most of the time. Valerion's expression turned pained. About your sister's treatments, I'd like to help, if you'll let me. Bianca stiffened. I don't want your money. It's not charity, Valerion said quickly. It's compensation. For disrupting your life, for putting you in danger, for wanting to feel something, Bianca interrupted. That's not something you need to pay me for. Then consider it a gift. From someone who has far more resources than he needs to someone who could use them. Bianca wanted to refuse on principle. She'd spent her entire adult life being independent, refusing help, handling everything herself. But the truth was that Julia's medical bills were crushing her. And if Valerion could help without it meaning anything, without it being transactional. Okay, she said finally. Okay, if you want to help with Julia's treatments, I won't stop you. But I'm not your kept woman or your obligation. I'm staying because I want to, not because you're paying for anything. Understood completely. Valerion's smile was genuine and warm. May I meet her, your sister? If she's well enough for visitors. That surprised Bianca. You want to meet Julia. I want to know the people who are important to you. And from what I understand, your sister is the most important person in your life. She is, Bianca admitted. She's everything. My parents died when I was 19 and she was 16. I've been her guardian ever since. We're all each other has. Then I would very much like to meet her, Valerion said gently. If you think she'd be comfortable meeting a vampire king. Bianca laughed, imagining Julia's reaction. She's going to lose her mind. She loves supernatural romance novels. This will either be her dream come true or she'll think I'm pranking her. Well, I'll do my best to be convincingly real. Valerion's expression turned more serious. Bianca, I know this is happening fast. Too fast by any reasonable standard. But I want you to know that I'm committed to making this work. Whatever this turns out to be. Even if it costs you your kingdom. Even then, Valerion said it without hesitation, and Bianca believed him. Which was perhaps the most terrifying part of this entire situation. They visited Julia that afternoon with Valerion driving a sleek black car that probably cost more than Bianca's entire life savings. He'd changed from his formal attire into something more casual, dark jeans and a black shirt, though he still looked impossibly regal and otherworldly. Julia was awake when they arrived, sitting up in bed with her tablet balanced on her knees. She looked small and fragile against the white hospital linens, her hair grown back in patchy tufts from the most recent round of chemo. But her eyes lit up when Bianca entered, then widened comically when she saw Valerion. Oh my God, Julia breathed. B, who is that? This is Valerion, Bianca said, moving to her sister's bedside. He's complicated to explain. He's a vampire, Julia said immediately, eyes huge. Holy crap, B, you brought a vampire to the hospital. An actual vampire. Is he the reason you sounded weird on the phone last night? How did you know I'm a vampire? Valerion asked, sounding genuinely curious. You're literally the palest person I've ever seen. You move like you're not quite subject to normal physics, and you're looking at my sister like she's the answer to the universe. Julia grinned despite her weakness. Also, I've read like 1,000,000 supernatural romance novels. I know the signs. Valerion laughed a real delighted sound. Your sister is very observant. She's also very sick and hopped up on medications, so forgive her if she says anything embarrassing, Bianca said pointedly. Too late. Julia was still staring at Valerion with undisguised fascination. So what's the story? Did you save B from something? Are you guys dating? Is this the part where you dramatically declare your eternal love and promise to turn her into a vampire? Jules! Bianca felt her face heat. But Valerion just smiled gently and moved closer to Julia's bedside. The story is complicated and ongoing. As for the rest, we're figuring it out as we go. But your sister is under my protection, which means you are too, by extension. I wanted to meet you and make sure you had everything you needed. Julia's eyes got suspiciously shiny. That's really nice of you. Most of B's previous boyfriends were jerks who didn't care that she had a sick sister. I'm not her boyfriend, Valerion said, then paused. Yet. I hope to earn that title eventually, but we're taking things slowly. How slowly? Because B doesn't usually take things slowly. She's more of a jump in and fix everything immediately type. Jules, stop talking, Bianca begged, mortified. I'm just saying, if this guy is actually into you, maybe don't overthink it for once. Julia reached out and grabbed Bianca's hand. You spend so much time taking care of me and working yourself to death. You deserve something good. Even if it's complicated and involves vampire politics. How do you know about vampire politics? Bianca demanded. I guessed. And based on his expression, I guessed right. Julia turned to Valerion. Take care of her, okay? She acts tough, but she's actually a marshmallow who worries constantly and never puts herself first. I will, Valerion promised, and his voice carried absolute conviction. I swear it on my name and crown. No harm will come to your sister while I exist to prevent it. Julia studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I believe you. Also, that was the most dramatically romantic thing I've ever heard in real life. So congratulations on living up to romance novel standards. The visit lasted another hour, with Julia extracting every detail she could about vampire society and Valerion answering with patient good humor. By the time they left, Julia was exhausted but happy, and Bianca felt lighter than she had in days. Your sister is delightful, Valerion said as they drove back to his castle, though she certainly doesn't filter her observations. She's dying, Bianca said flatly. When you're dying, you lose interest in social niceties. Then more quietly, the doctors give her maybe a year, 2 if the new treatments work. Valerion's hand found hers across the console, squeezing gently. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Bianca blinked back tears. She's the only family I have left. I don't know what I'll do when she stopped, unable to finish the sentence. You'll survive, Valerion said quietly. Because that's what you do. You survive and you keep going and you honor her memory by living. But Bianca, you don't have to face that alone. Not anymore. We barely know each other, Bianca pointed out. Then we'll get to know each other. I'm not going anywhere. They spent the evening in Valerion's study, with him teaching her more about vampire politics and her asking increasingly pointed questions about power structures and historical alliances. She was a fast learner, connecting dots and identifying patterns with the kind of analytical thinking that impressed him visibly. You'd make an excellent strategist, Valerion observed after she accurately predicted how 3 different vampire houses would react to the failed wedding. I was studying to be a teacher before I had to drop out, Bianca said. Turns out analyzing student behavior and vampire politics use similar skills. Have you thought about going back to university? Can't afford it. And even if I could, Julia needs me. What if cost wasn't an issue? Valerion asked carefully. What if you had the resources and support to do both care for Julia and complete your education? Bianca looked at him suspiciously. Are you offering to pay for my degree? I'm offering you options, resources, the ability to build the life you want instead of the life circumstances forced on you. That's very generous and also kind of overwhelming. Then don't think about it now. Just know that the offer stands. Valerion set aside the document he'd been reviewing. It's late, you should rest. What about you? Do vampires sleep? We can, though we don't need to as frequently as humans. But I often rest during daylight hours when I'm most vulnerable. That reminded Bianca of something. Sunlight. I noticed the castle has a lot of protective shutters and blackout curtains. Sunlight won't kill me instantly, but prolonged exposure is painful and weakening. Most vampires avoid it entirely. So no beach vacations. Valerion smiled. No beach vacations, though I understand the appeal intellectually. Bianca found herself yawning, exhaustion catching up with her. Okay, you're right, I should sleep. Big day of vampire politics tomorrow? Undoubtedly. The council will want answers about Seraphine's visit and my plans for managing the political fallout. Fun. Bianca stood stretching. Do you have a plan? I'm formulating one. It mostly involves being stubbornly protective of you and refusing to apologize for my choices. That's not really a plan. It's a philosophy which is close enough. Valerion stood as well, moving around the desk. Bianca, before you go, may I ask you something? Sure. Do you feel it? This connection between us? Or is it entirely one-sided? Bianca considered lying, considered deflecting. But Julia's words echoed in her head, you deserve something good, and she found herself being honest instead. I feel something. I don't know what it is yet. But when you look at me, I feel seen. And when you touch me, it's like electricity. So yes, I feel something. The relief and joy that washed over Valerion's face was almost painful to witness. Thank you for telling me, for being honest even when it would be easier not to be. You deserve honesty, Bianca said. You've been nothing but honest with me. Valerion stepped closer and Bianca's breath caught. He moved slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and when she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands. His skin was cool against hers, his touch gentle despite the strength she could feel coiled beneath it. May I kiss you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Bianca's heart was thundering so loud she was sure he could hear it. Yes, Valerion leaned down and his lips met hers with a gentleness that made her knees weak. The kiss was soft, questioning, like he was learning the shape of her mouth. His lips were cool and impossibly soft. And when Bianca made a small sound in the back of her throat, he deepened the kiss slightly, one hand sliding into her hair. It was the best kiss of Bianca's life. And when they finally broke apart, she was breathing hard and Valerion's eyes had darkened to the color of storm clouds. That was Bianca started. Incredible, Valerion finished. You're incredible. That's probably the vampire connection talking. No, that's me talking. Valerion pressed his forehead to hers, breathing in slowly. Bianca Zimmerman, you are quickly becoming the most important thing in my 800-year existence. And that terrifies and amazes me in equal measure. Good, Bianca said, smiling despite her racing heart. Because you terrify and amaze me too. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped together in the quiet study. And Bianca let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this impossible situation could work. The next 2 weeks fell into a strange routine. Bianca spent her days learning vampire politics and her nights talking with Valerion about everything from philosophy to favorite foods. She visited Julia regularly, always with Valerion, and watched as her sister's health gradually improved thanks to the experimental treatments Valerion had arranged and funded. The political situation remained tense but stable. Seraphine's family had withdrawn their initial threats of war in favor of what Cassian called strategic coldness. They weren't attacking, but they weren't cooperating either. Other vampire houses watched and waited, trying to determine how the power balance would shift. And through it all, Bianca and Valerion grew closer, not rushing but not denying the connection between them either. There were more kisses, increasingly heated, and long conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. There were moments of laughter and moments of comfortable silence. Bianca was falling for him. She knew it, and she suspected he knew it too, even though neither of them had said the words yet. Then, 3 weeks after the failed wedding, everything fell apart. Bianca was visiting Julia alone. Valerion had a council meeting he couldn't avoid when the hospital alarms started blaring. She looked up from her sister's bedside, confused, and saw vampires flooding into the hospital through the windows. Not just any vampires. Vampires in the colors of House Nightshade. B? Julia's voice was scared, and Bianca immediately moved to position herself between her sister and the door. A vampire appeared in the doorway, female, white-haired, with crimson eyes that promised violence. Bianca Zimmerman, you're coming with us. Like hell I am, Bianca said, her voice steadier than she felt. This is a hospital. There are sick humans here. You can't. We can do whatever we want, the vampire interrupted. Seraphine sends her regards. She said to tell you that if the king wants you back, he'll need to negotiate. They'd come to kidnap her. To use her as leverage against Valerion. The realization sent ice through Bianca's veins. Don't touch my sister, Bianca said firmly, even as 2 more vampires entered the room. She's sick. She has nothing to do with this. We're not interested in your sister, the female vampire said. Just you. Now you can come peacefully, or we can drag you. Your choice. Bianca looked at Julia, saw the terror in her sister's eyes, and made a split-second decision. I'll come. Just leave her alone. B, no! Julia tried to sit up, but she was too weak. It's okay, Bianca lied, moving toward the vampires with her hands raised. Valerion will come for me. It'll be okay. The last thing she saw before they put a hood over her head was Julia's face, pale and terrified, and then everything went dark. When they removed the hood, Bianca found herself in what looked like a dungeon. Stone walls, minimal lighting, and the smell of old blood. She was alone in a cell, barred with what she assumed was reinforced metal designed to hold supernatural prisoners. Time passed, she couldn't tell how much. Hours, maybe a day. No one came to check on her. No food, no water, just silence and darkness, and the growing fear that maybe Valerion wouldn't find her in time. Then finally voices. Approaching footsteps. The sound of locks disengaging. Seraphine appeared on the other side of the bars, looking as flawlessly beautiful as ever. Hello, Bianca. I hope your accommodations are adequate. What do you want? Bianca demanded, hating how rough her voice sounded. What I want is my life back, but since that's impossible, I'll settle for making Valerion suffer the way he made me suffer. Seraphine's smile was cold and cruel. He loves you, or thinks he does. So I'm going to take you from him the way he took my future from me. He'll kill you for this, perhaps, but I'll hurt him first, and that's enough. Seraphine turned to leave, then paused. I was going to kill you quickly, mercifully. But I think instead I'll keep you alive just long enough for Valerion to watch you die. Let him feel the helplessness, the loss. Let him understand what he destroyed. You're insane, Bianca said. I'm heartbroken, Seraphine corrected. There's a difference. Then she swept away, leaving Bianca alone in the darkness again. Bianca sank to the floor of the cell, wrapping her arms around her knees. She wasn't going to panic. She wasn't going to break down. Valerion would come. He'd promised to protect her, and she believed him. She just hoped he arrived before Seraphine's revenge took a turn from psychological to fatal. The rescue came sooner than expected, maybe 12 hours after Bianca's initial capture, though it was hard to judge time in the windowless cell. She heard fighting, first crashes and screams and the sound of metal meeting flesh. Then Valerion's voice, cold and absolute. "Where is she?" More fighting. Closer now. Then the door to the dungeon exploded inward with enough force to crack the stone frame, and Valerion strode through like an avenging angel. His white hair was disheveled, his formal clothes splattered with blood, and his eyes blazed with silver fire. "Bianca," he breathed, and the relief in his voice was profound. He crossed to the cell in 2 strides, gripped the bars, and simply ripped the door off its hinges. Then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her so tightly that Bianca could barely breathe. "You're alive. Thank God you're alive. I thought when they told me they'd taken you." He pulled back just enough to scan her face, his hands roaming over her arms and shoulders like he was checking for injuries. "Did they hurt you?" "No, scared me, but didn't hurt me." Bianca clung to him, feeling the tremors running through his body. "You came?" "Of course I came. Did you think I wouldn't?" Valerion cupped her face, his expression fierce. "Bianca, I would have torn down every building in this territory to find you. I would have declared war on every vampire house. I would have burned the world to ash if it meant getting you back. That's dramatic and also kind of terrifying. It's the truth." Valerion kissed her then, hard and desperate, and Bianca kissed him back with equal intensity. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "You're never leaving my sight again. Ever. I don't care if it makes me obsessive or controlling or Valerion." Bianca put her hand over his mouth. "Breathe. I'm okay. You found me. It's over." "It's not over," Valerion said darkly. "Seraphine did this. She ordered your kidnapping. And for that, she will pay." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done weeks ago. End this conflict permanently." Valerion pulled back, his expression hardening into something regal and implacable. "House Nightshade has violated every treaty, every law, every code of vampire conduct by taking you. They've given me legal cause to dissolve our alliance completely and demand reparations." "That sounds like a fancy way of saying you're going to start a war." "No, I'm going to end one." Valerion took her hand. "Come, we're going home. And then I'm calling a council of houses to formally resolve this." The council of houses turned out to be exactly as dramatic as Bianca had imagined. 5 vampire houses, each sending their most powerful representatives, gathered in Valerion's throne room 3 days after Bianca's rescue. The room was filled with beautiful, dangerous immortals, all dressed in elaborate court dress, all watching Bianca with varying degrees of curiosity and hostility. Valerion had insisted she be present, and he'd dressed her in a gown of deep sapphire that made her feel like she'd stepped into a fairy tale. She sat beside his throne, in a chair that was slightly lower but no less ornate, and tried not to let her nervousness show. "This council is called to address the recent actions of House Nightshade," Valerion began, his voice carrying through the vast room with absolute authority. 3 days ago, agents of that house kidnapped a human under my explicit protection. This constitutes a violation of our most fundamental laws regarding the treatment of protected individuals. Lord Nightshade, Seraphine's father, stood from his seat among the representatives. He was older looking than most vampires, with white hair pulled back severely and eyes like frozen blood. "My daughter acted emotionally and without my permission. I have disciplined her accordingly." "Disciplined her?" Valerion's voice could have cut glass. "Your daughter ordered the kidnapping and threatened murder of an innocent human, and you think discipline is sufficient?" "The human is not innocent," Seraphine's voice rang out. She stood from beside her father, looking composed despite the tension. "She destroyed our alliance. She caused political chaos. She poured wine," Valerion interrupted, standing from his throne. "That's all Bianca did. Pour wine at a wedding. Everything else, every choice, every consequence has been the result of my decisions or yours. Do not blame her for responding to circumstances neither of us created." "You looked at her," Seraphine said, and for the first time, real emotion cracked through her composure. "You looked at her, and you chose her over everything. Over me, over the alliance, over 2 centuries of planning. How is that not her fault?" "Because I made that choice," Valerion said, his voice gentling slightly. "Seraphine, I know you're hurt. I know I humiliated you. But taking Bianca won't undo that. It will only make things worse." "It would make me feel better," Seraphine said bitterly. "Would it?" Valerion descended from the dais, moving toward her with predatory grace. "Would killing an innocent human actually heal your wounded pride? Or would it just make you a monster?" Seraphine flinched like he'd struck her. "I'm already a monster. We all are." "No," Valerion said quietly. "We're not. We can be more than our nature, Seraphine. You've always known that. You've always been better than this." For a long moment, Seraphine just stared at him. Then her composure crumbled completely, and tears, actual tears, slid down her pale cheeks. "I was supposed to be your queen. I was supposed to matter. You do matter. Just not in the way either of us expected." Valerion glanced back at Bianca, and his expression softened. "I can't give you what you want, Seraphine. But I can give you something else. An alliance built on mutual respect rather than marriage. Trade agreements that benefit both our houses. A friendship, if you'll accept it. Friendship, Seraphine repeated, like the word was foreign. Then she laughed, broken and bitter. You humiliate me, you choose a human over me, and now you offer friendship. You're either incredibly merciful or incredibly cruel. I'm neither. I'm just trying to find a solution that doesn't end in more bloodshed. Seraphine looked at Bianca then, really looked at her, and something in her expression shifted. She really is important to you. This isn't political maneuvering or strategy. No, Valerion confirmed. She's everything. Then I suppose I have no choice but to accept reality. Seraphine wiped her tears away with an elegant gesture. I withdraw my claim against the human, and I will convince my father to accept your proposed alliance terms. But Valerion, her voice turned sharp again. If you ever humiliate me like that again, I will make you regret it for the rest of your immortal existence. Understood, Valerion said gravely. The council continued for another hour, working out the details of the new alliance between House Valerion and House Nightshade. Bianca listened, fascinated despite herself, as centuries-old vampires negotiated with the precision of corporate lawyers. When it was finally over, and the representatives had departed, Valerion returned to his throne and pulled Bianca into his lap with complete disregard for propriety. That was exhausting, he muttered into her hair. You were amazing, Bianca said, wrapping her arms around his neck. You de-escalated what could have been a war into a business arrangement. I'm 800 years old. I've had practice at negotiation. Valerion pulled back to look at her. But I meant what I said in there. You're everything to me, Bianca. In 3 weeks, you've become the center of my entire existence. That's a lot of pressure, Bianca said, but she was smiling. Then, let me clarify. You're everything to me. But I don't expect you to be responsible for my happiness. I just want you to know how important you are. I love you, Bianca said, and realized it was true the moment the words left her mouth. I know it's too soon and too intense and probably too dramatic, but I love you. You're arrogant and protective, and you've completely disrupted my life, and I love you anyway. Valerion stared at her like she'd just handed him the universe. Say that again. I love you. Again. I love you, Valerion. He kissed her then, deep and consuming, and Bianca felt like she was drowning in the best possible way. When they finally broke apart, Valerion's expression was raw with emotion. I love you, he said, voice rough. I've loved you since the moment I saw you in that cathedral. I've loved you through every moment of chaos and political maneuvering and fear. Bianca Zimmerman, you are the answer to 800 years of searching, and I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anything. That's the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. I've had 800 years to practice romantic declarations. I should be good at them by now. Bianca laughed, pressing her face into his shoulder. What happens now? Do I just stay here? Live with you? Figure out how to be the human girlfriend of a vampire king? If you want to. Valerion said carefully, but Bianca, I'm not asking you to give up your life for me. If you want to finish your degree, we'll make it happen. If you want to keep working, we'll find a way. If you want to focus on Julia, I'll support that completely. You don't have to become something you're not just because you're with me. What if I want to become something new? Bianca asked. What if I want to learn about vampire politics and maybe help negotiate alliances? I was pretty good at understanding the council dynamics. Valerion's expression lit up. You were excellent at it. You'd make an incredible advisor if you wanted that role, so I could actually be useful here. Contribute something beyond just being your girlfriend. You contribute by existing, Valerion said firmly. But yes, if you want to be involved in governance, I would welcome your insights. They talked late into the night, planning a future that seemed impossible just weeks ago. Bianca would finish her degree through distance learning, which Valerion would fund. She'd spend part of her time learning vampire politics and serving as an informal advisor. And she'd continue to be present for Julia, supporting her sister through her treatments. It wasn't a traditional life. But then nothing about their relationship was traditional. 6 months later, Bianca stood in Valerion's study, reviewing trade agreements with 3 different vampire houses. She'd become surprisingly good at vampire politics, her outsider perspective giving her insights that centuries-old vampires often missed. Valerion consulted her on nearly every major decision, valuing her opinion in ways that still surprised her. Julia's health had stabilized. She was in remission, a minor miracle according to her doctors, though Bianca suspected the experimental treatments Valerion had funded were more than minor. Her sister was back in school, studying art history and regularly demanding updates on Bianca's absolutely insane vampire romance life. Seraphine had become an unlikely ally. She and Bianca weren't exactly friends, but they developed a mutual respect that made alliance negotiations much smoother. The vampire occasionally sent Bianca sarcastic notes about vampire politics, which Bianca found oddly endearing. And Valerion was everything. Patient and protective, passionate and thoughtful, teaching her about his world while learning about hers. They'd navigated the initial intensity of their connection and found something deeper underneath real love, built on trust and respect and genuine affection. "You're staring off into space again." Valerion's voice broke through her thoughts. He appeared behind her, arms sliding around her waist as he rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "How different my life is now compared to 6 months ago," Bianca admitted, leaning back into his embrace. "How I went from being a broke college student to the girlfriend of a vampire king. It still feels surreal sometimes." "Regrets?" Valerion asked quietly. "Not even a little." Bianca turned in his arms to face him. "You know what the craziest part is? I'm happy. Despite all the danger and politics and supernatural drama, I'm genuinely happy." "So am I," Valerion said, smiling that smile that was reserved only for her, warm and real and completely unguarded. "For 800 years I existed without truly living. And then you poured wine at my wedding, looked up at exactly the wrong moment, and changed everything. Best catering job I ever took, worst wedding I ever attended. You've only attended one wedding, your own, which you abandoned, precisely. Therefore it was definitely the worst." Valerion's expression turned more serious. "Bianca, there's something I want to ask you. Something important." Bianca's heart skipped. "Okay, I know we've only been together 6 months. I know by human standards that's incredibly fast. But by vampire standards, it's both an eternity and an instant." Valerion took her hands, his cool fingers threading through hers. "I love you, you know that, and I want to build a life with you however long that life may be." "That sounds like the beginning of a proposal," Bianca said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's not yet." Valerion squeezed her hands gently. "Because there's something you need to understand first. Something I've been putting off discussing because it's complicated and potentially painful." Dread curled in Bianca's stomach. "What is it?" "You're human. Which means barring some miracle you're going to age while I stay frozen at this point. You're going to get sick, get old, eventually die, and I'm going to have to watch it happen." His voice cracked slightly. "Bianca, I've lost everyone I've ever cared about to time. My family, my friends, lovers, and allies across 8 centuries. Everyone eventually leaves through death or distance. And knowing that I'll lose you too." "Hey." Bianca pulled one hand free and cupped his face. "I know. I've known since the beginning. Humans and vampires don't get fairy tale endings, not usually. But they could," Valerion said intensely. "If you wanted. There are ways to extend human life, to slow aging. Some vampires have human companions who live for centuries through magical means. And there's always the option of transformation." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Transformation. Becoming a vampire. Leaving humanity behind permanently. "Have you thought about it?" Bianca asked carefully. "Turning me? Every day," Valerion admitted. "But I've never suggested it because that's a choice only you can make. I won't pressure you, won't manipulate you, won't even hint that I want it unless you're the one to bring it up. But you do want it." "I want you with me," Valerion said. "For as long as possible." "But Bianca, becoming a vampire isn't a gift. It's a curse as much as a blessing. You'd be giving up sunlight, normal food, the possibility of children. You'd be tied to blood and darkness forever. I won't ask you to make that sacrifice." Bianca thought about it, really thought about it. About living for centuries, watching Julia and any other loved ones grow old and die. About giving up the human experiences she'd taken for granted. About becoming something fundamentally different from what she was now. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I'm not ready to decide that yet. But can I tell you what I do know? Please, I know that I want to be with you. For as long as I can, in whatever form that takes. If that means staying human and having a normal lifespan, then we'll make the most of the time we have. If it means magical life extension, we'll figure that out. And if eventually I decide I want transformation," she paused, making sure he was looking at her, "I'll tell you, and we'll make that decision together." Relief washed over Valerion's face. "That's all I can ask for. Time and honesty and your presence for as long as you're willing to give it, then you have it." Bianca pulled him down into a kiss, pouring everything she felt into it, love and trust and commitment, and the promise of whatever future they could build together. When they broke apart, Valerion smiled. "So not a proposal, but a promise. To figure this out together, whatever this ends up being, that's better than a proposal," Bianca said, "because it's honest about how complicated this is." "You make me better," Valerion said softly. "More honest, more patient, more willing to accept uncertainty. You've changed me in ways I didn't know I needed." "Good, because you've changed me too. Made me braver, more willing to take risks, more open to impossible things." They stood together in the study, wrapped in each other's arms as twilight fell over the city outside. Somewhere out there, vampire politics continued its eternal dance. Somewhere, Julia was getting healthier by the day. Somewhere, their future was unfolding in ways neither of them could predict, but in that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the connection between them, the impossible, illogical, absolutely real love that had started with a glance across a cathedral and grown into something that would shape both their existences. 1 year after the abandoned wedding, Valerion threw a celebration. Not a wedding, neither of them was ready for that particular political statement yet, but an anniversary party marking the night they'd met. He invited the major vampire houses, along with a carefully selected group of humans including Julia, who was healthy enough to attend. The ballroom was decorated in silver and sapphire, and Bianca wore a gown that made her feel like a princess from a Gothic fairy tale. She stood at Valerion's side as guests arrived, playing the role of his official companion with a grace that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Seraphine arrived fashionably late, dressed in crimson and looking stunning. She approached Bianca and Valerion with something that might have been a smile. "Congratulations on surviving a year together," she said dryly. "I'll admit, I thought this would have imploded by now." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Bianca said, matching her tone. "I'm just being honest. Vampire-human relationships rarely work long-term." Seraphine glanced at Valerion. "But I'll concede that you two seem to have found something real, even if it did destroy my wedding." "I'm never going to live that down, am I?" Valerion asked. "Not in this century, no." But Seraphine's smile was genuine now. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're happy, both of you. Even if the path to that happiness was incredibly inconvenient for me." "That's probably the nicest thing you've ever said to me," Bianca observed. "Don't get used to it. I'm not going soft just because you're tolerable." After Seraphine moved on to terrorize other guests, Julia appeared at Bianca's elbow. She looked healthy and vibrant, her hair fully grown back, her color good. "This is the coolest party I've ever been to. There are literally vampires everywhere." "Welcome to my life," Bianca said, hugging her sister tightly. "I still can't believe this is real sometimes, that my big sister is dating a vampire king who literally abandoned his wedding for her." Julia pulled back, studying Bianca's face. "But you're happy, really happy." "I can see it." "I am," Bianca confirmed. "It's complicated and sometimes scary and definitely not what I planned for my life. But Jules, I've never been happier, then that's all that matters." Julia squeezed her hand. "Mom and Dad would be proud of you, you know, of how you've handled everything, the sick sister, the impossible romance, all of it." Tears pricked Bianca's eyes. "You think so?" "I know so. Now go dance with your vampire king. I'm going to go find Cassian and interrogate him about vampire culture." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of music and dancing and political conversation. Bianca found herself genuinely enjoying the vampire politics now, understanding the subtle currents and unspoken alliances that shaped every interaction. Near midnight, Valerion pulled her out onto overlooking the city. The night air was cool, and below them, lights glittered like earthbound stars. "A year ago, I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life," Valerion said quietly. "Binding myself to someone I respected but didn't love, resigning myself to centuries more of careful, calculated existence. And then I poured wine and ruined everything," Bianca said. "You saved everything," Valerion corrected. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Bianca, I said this wasn't a proposal, but I think I'm ready for it to be one if you are." Bianca's breath caught. "Valerion, I know it's fast by human standards, but I've waited 800 years to find you, and I don't want to waste another moment pretending I don't want to spend eternity with you." He pulled a ring from his pocket, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and timeless. "Marry me. Not for politics or alliance or strategy. Marry me because I love you more than I thought possible. Because you make me want to be better, do better, live better." Bianca stared at the ring, at the hope and vulnerability in Valerion's expression, at the impossible future he was offering. A year ago, she'd been pouring wine at his wedding. Now he was asking her to be his bride. It was insane, illogical, completely unprecedented. "Yes," she said, and watched joy transform his face. "Yes, I'll marry you, on one condition, anything. When we do this, we do it right. Small ceremony, people we actually care about, vows that mean something. No political alliances or calculated arrangements. Just us making a promise to each other." "That sounds perfect," Valerion breathed. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit like everything else about them, and pulled her into a kiss that made the entire city seem to fade away. When they finally broke apart, Bianca was crying and laughing at the same time. "This is crazy. We're crazy. Completely insane," Valerion agreed. "But Bianca, I'd rather be crazy with you than sane without you. That's the most ridiculous romantic thing you've ever said." "I'm a romantic fool now. You've corrupted my careful vampire logic." "Good, you were too serious before." They stood together on the balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, while inside the party continued without them. Somewhere in that ballroom, Julia was probably telling embarrassing stories about Bianca to anyone who would listen. Somewhere, Seraphine was probably making caustic comments about love and romance. Somewhere, vampire politics ground on in its eternal dance, but out here under the stars, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the vampire king who had abandoned his wedding for a woman pouring wine, and the human who had been brave enough to stay when logic said she should run. They were married 6 months later in a private ceremony at sunset. Julia served as Bianca's maid of honor, and Cassian stood up for Valerion. Seraphine attended and only made 3 sarcastic comments during the reception, which everyone agreed was impressive restraint. The vows were simple and honest promises to love and support each other, to face whatever challenges came with honesty and courage, to build a life together that honored both their natures. And when Valerion kissed his bride, it felt like destiny. Like every choice they'd made, every challenge they'd faced, had been leading to this moment. 5 years later, Bianca still hadn't decided about transformation. She'd chosen magical life extension instead, a compromise that would give her a few more centuries without requiring her to give up her humanity entirely. It meant she aged slowly, not at all, and could remain at Valerion's side for the foreseeable future. Julia had beaten cancer completely and was pursuing a doctorate in art history. She visited regularly, always bringing new questions about vampire culture and gleefully disrupting the formal atmosphere of the vampire court. And Valerion remained exactly as he'd been in that cathedral 2.5 years ago. Protective and passionate, logical and loving, the vampire king who had thrown away everything for a moment of genuine connection. They had their challenges. There were still political complications, still tensions with certain vampire houses, still the ever-present question of mortality and what their future would ultimately look like. But they faced it together, with honesty and trust and a love that had started impossibly and grown into something real and lasting and absolutely worth every risk they'd taken. Because sometimes the best things in life were the ones that made no logical sense. The ones that defied planning and strategy and careful calculation. The ones that started with a glance across a crowded cathedral and a vampire king who was brave enough to abandon his arranged bride mid-vow for the girl pouring his wine. And Bianca, who had taken a catering job because she needed $300, had somehow ended up with a love story that would last centuries. Which was either the best luck or the most ridiculous fate the universe had ever bestowed. She chose to believe it was both. And every time Valerion looked at her with those silver eyes full of love and wonder, she knew she'd made the right choice. The choice to stay, the choice to love, the choice to believe in impossible things. And they lived not happily ever after, because life was too complicated for such simple endings, but happily together, which was infinitely better. Through challenges and celebrations, through politics and peace, through the endless dance of vampire society and the precious fleeting beauty of human existence, together. Always together. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.